Luke chapter 1, in verse 1. Well, we'll start in verse 5. Luke 1, verse 5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abiah, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. They were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. And they had no child, because that Elizabeth was barren, and they both were now well stricken in years. Our Heavenly Father, we approach the throne, and in our mind we can see you there seated high and lifted up. The illustration that is given to us that is as best we can see there, either in the book of Revelation or in Solomon's throne. 7 lions standing up by the steps. The green rainbow above your head. The things that your word has told us and revealed to us as we talk to you, we know that you are seated and we are down here, but somehow, some way through your divinity, you hear us. And it's shocking to know not only that you hear us, but that you pay attention. The God of glory pays attention to us. So we're thankful for it. We ask that you would enjoy as we pay attention now to your word. We don't want to do all the talking, but we want to be listening. We ask that you and your Spirit would do that you would speak to us through your word like only you can. And we'll be thankful for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Here, as we're looking at Luke's record, we have the run-up to the Lord's birth, the crucial and significant events leading to this single the largest event in history between the birth of Christ and, of course, the crucifixion and resurrection. But as we're looking at Luke's account, we can hear the solemn sobriety in his voice as the intro is read. When he starts in verse 1, he says, "For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us." Now we realize by now it's been decades since these events took place, and the gospel is flourishing. The Lord is blessing the apostles immensely with signs and wonders. People are becoming saved, sometimes by the thousands per one sermon, and so it is definitely flourishing, and it says most assuredly believed among us. Verse 2, "Even as they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word." The apostles themselves saw, they handled Jesus himself, even the resurrected Christ. But even so, despite all that, Luke, the physician, says, "It seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write unto thee in order, most excellent Theophilus," which tells us then who the audience is that he's writing to. This isn't anybody. This isn't somebody who is on the sidelines. This is someone who would be addressed with a prefix of most excellence. He's a man of political estate. He has stature. He's probably wealthy and somewhat powerful. But look what he says as he does this. "I'm writing to you specifically in order, most excellent Theophilus, that thou mightest know the certainty of those things wherein thou hast been instructed." So what Luke is doing is he's giving further due diligence to this particular person, Theophilus, who is already, it says, he's already instructed. He already knows the gospel. He's already probably a believer. He's already converted. But just to make sure that these things that are surely believed among us are written down in order. So it starts the next verse with, of course, the history of the politics of the day. He marks it by who was in power. there, the king, it says in verse 5, there was in those days, the days of Herod. And as soon as you hear the word Herod, all the readers would have groaned. There would have been a sigh, maybe even in their heart, a hiss for a person so villainous as Herod. Just a scoundrel, a villain, Herod. But it was in these days. These would be the days that eternity would pick for heaven's darling to be living. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abiah, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. So both sides of the family are involved heavily in the temple because they are both in the lineage of priesthood. So you can see everybody, when they have Thanksgiving dinner or any kind of dinner, it is a religious conversation and a very political conversation because both sides of the family are involved in the temple. So they are entrenched in these things. There is shop talk. This is what's currently happening. This and this priesthood and this high priest and these Levites and all these things. This is their lives are entrenched in all the things regarding the things of God. Two people in particular, Zacharias and Elizabeth, says they were both righteous before God, which is unusual. Don't forget. Some of the people that are in the priesthood at this time are young, are the same exact priests that will be standing there saying, "Crucify him." The priesthood was already corrupted by now. So when they talk about these particular priests walking righteous and blameless, they're unusual. They were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord. It says even blameless. But look at 7, something very interesting, a key actually. It says, and they had no child because Elizabeth was barren. And now they both were now well stricken in years. That is an interesting dynamic that God has set forth, that these people would have no child. Now, science in our day has advanced tremendously, and really you can almost do just about, well, in some sections, sometimes you think you can do anything, and then sometimes they're so dumb they can't do anything. So they can come and put a man on the moon, they can come up with all these great scientific DNA and look into the secret things, but they can't even cure a headache. Well, take Tylenol. Oh, okay. That's as best as you can get. You can put somebody in the moon, but you can't stop my indigestion. God is as advanced as science can get. They cannot control birth. With all the fertility drugs and all the things that go along with that, and I know that there are even some people here who have spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to make it happen, to try to solve the problem of childbirth, and at no avail. And they are making wonders with it. But the truth of the matter is if God puts the kibosh on it, if God stops the conception, there's nothing anyone can do to make it happen. Because God and God alone is in control of creation. No matter how much they want to say that they are going to get it, they cannot. Here what we have is God is intervening to these people who are His, who are righteous before Him. It's not because of sin. They are blameless. They walk before the Lord. But it says they had no child because Elizabeth, her womb was shut. And now on top of that, they both are old. In fact, very old. They're well stricken in years. The years have taken their toll upon them, and they have served wonderfully. Now, what we'd have to do then, in order not to pass this up, because what I would like to do is spend a few weeks heading concerning this particular verse as we lead up to Christmas, which is another miraculous birth. Because that's what we're about to look at here, is a miraculous birth, a movement, an advancement in the kingdom. So I would like to spend a few weeks on this, even bringing this into light with our current day, with the current events, and bringing it to our own table about this fact that here's a woman and a man, a husband, a couple, and God has chosen to keep them barren. Now, let's just throw a ribbon in here, we'll come back, but I want to go to a popular verse that we all know in Matthew 19 concerning children, when the people were bringing young ones to Jesus, and we're familiar with this is nothing new, but in Matthew 19:13, it says, Then were there brought unto him little children, that he should put his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. They think, no, which is common. Think of that. A bunch of pesky rascals running around saying things and biting on your heels like piranhas in the night. And then they're like, no, get these kids away from the master. And Jesus rebukes them. Look what he says, and again, we're familiar. Jesus says, Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. Okay. Well, somebody just remarked when he says this, and they said, how so? I mean, Jesus just made actually a remarkable statement. Children that are ankle biters who are just rebels at heart. I mean, they are absolute revolters. Jesus is saying, no, bring them here, these bad kids, bring them to me, because such is the kingdom of heaven. Now, somebody's going to have to say the question, the obvious one, how so? And then you get, the people who will say, well, it's because it's childlike faith, that's what he's talking about. The kids that they're simple-minded and it's childlike faith. But I have a suspicion that it's a little more complicated than that. There's two kinds of truck owners in the world, brothers. You can see the one truck owner, he buys his Dodge pickup, his Ram, and it is waxed and washed and armoralled on the tires. Then you have another truck owner who backs it up into 6 inches of muck and mire, breaks out the chains, scratches it as the chains drag across the paint, it gets in through the woods, scratches half the sides of it up, and then pulls it and then loads it up to something that has at least 10,000 pounds worth of stuff on the back. And you try to pull it out, you hear the strain of the motor, the mud is splattering all over the place, everybody is slopping around in the mud, so you stop, you put it in 4-wheel low because there just isn't enough horsepower, and so you can hear the strain of the motor, and finally it pulls it all out, and okay, we did it. Because some truck owners realize that a truck is made for working. Some truck owners, their truck never leaves the pavement. Those are the ones, that are wearing skinny jeans and a bun, the kinds that are gay. Those kind of boys, those are called gay boys. And we don't want nothing to do with them here. So if that's you, you can get saved and maybe you can become a dirty truck owner. No, I'm not opposed to having a clean truck. In fact, I like mine clean, but it's just too difficult to do. You can get a clean answer from what Jesus just said. Such are the kingdom of heaven are children. The clean answer is, well, childlike faith. But we around here know that there's much more to that. So let's just keep that in mind then when we go back to Luke and realize this person here, if Jesus says that children are as the kingdom of heaven, why then has he chosen in his sovereignty to not allow these two people to bear one? think of this now. Something very significant is God is doing then, because he has forbidden good people. You know that they would have raised children just in a tremendous way, which we know that they ended up doing. John the Baptist, Jesus says of their child, there's none greater born of women. So then why does he decide in his sovereignty to not allow it? They're barren. They're sad. The reproach that took place upon them, their house was empty. They had no laughter. But the book of Job talks about the secret of their house. They had none. So then it's just keep going, do your work. They're serving the Lord best they can. They're old now. They're veterans in the temple. Verse 8, it came to pass that while he executed the priest's office before God in the order of his course, according to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. So this is an amazing time for them. This is a one-in-a-lifetime situation. And a lot of times for all the priests, it never happened. This was an exclusive one-off. This is something that it was a very privileged thing to do, was to burn incense. And here, before he dies, God is gracious to him, and the lot just happens to fall. We know that the sovereignty of God. And so he goes in, and there you can see him. He gets up in the morning. His wife is making sure that he's just right. Elizabeth is on him, and and he's nervous and she's nervous, and they finally make their way to the temple, and it says he goes in to do his work. Outside, it says the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense, specifically while this older gentleman is doing the work. So my question then is, well, what are they praying for? What are they praying about? We know he's burning incense, which is actually a picture of prayer itself, heading up toward heaven. A good smell. The smoke rises as a picture of our prayer. So he's doing that. But as this multitude, it says, of people, a whole ton of people. And again, I'm reminded that the people here they're not overly spiritual. What are they praying for? And I wonder, do they have a sense of something? Do they have this sense, like maybe something special is about to happen, that God in his sovereignty would allow this old timer to do this? Is there a feeling of anticipation? Do they think that they might be on the precipice of something big? They are, aren't they? The deliverer that has been spoken of for thousands of years is about to take place. They don't know this, but maybe the Spirit of the Lord has just given little unctions, little inclinations to his people to make them think, man, it just seems like maybe something big. Do you ever get those? Well, if so, what would you be praying for? Better yet, what would we be doing? For we are not hearers only, correct? Be ye doers also. Word. And that is us. So I think our church is very unique, the people here that assemble every Sunday. So we wouldn't only be just praying. I think a lot of us would actually be, well, if I feel something and sense something, then I must be about my Father's business. Let's see what the prophets have to say and make this illustration come to life in Isaiah chapter 1. Now, we're not going to finish up the sermon because it's going to be probably 3 to 4 weeks, but I'd like to take a look to compare all these things that we're seeing happen as the kingdom is about to move and compare them with Isaiah the prophet. Because I have a suspicion, honestly, that in our day, the kingdom is about to move. I'm not a prophet. I don't know these things, and I certainly could be wrong. But I just have this suspicion that God and the kingdom are moving in a very peculiar way. So here we are, the prophet Isaiah in chapter 1, and he says, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah, Jerusalem, and look at it, he does the same thing, which is the MO, is we're going to establish the timing of these things via the administrations, the political administrations. So the things that this prophet saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah the king, Jotham the king, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So that in and of itself, depending on your biblical knowledge of the history, you just went through a roller coaster ride. Because that means that this man, Isaiah, was a prophet during a very good king, say Hezekiah in his later days, and a very wicked administration in Ahaz. So there's been ebbs and flows to something so bad, yet revival. Uzziah was really good economically, but spiritually it was in the tank. Jotham, he's the kind of a Jimmy Carter kind of, who is that? Who is even Jotham? Jimmy Carter, this guy, he's a peanut picker. Who is, Ahaz, he's an Obama or Hillary. The dude just whacks people. He's just an absolute scumball. And then you have Hezekiah. He's like, well, we got to straighten these things out. So now we're established on some of his ministry. Look what he says. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord hath spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. And he says an illustration in verse 3, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doth not know. My people doth not consider. That's interesting. They don't know. They don't know because my people don't consider. Now, some of you are familiar with the Flavian Amphitheater. More of you probably know it as the Roman Colosseum. That was an edifice of Hellenism. Now, some of you know that, some of you don't. It may be a new word to you, Hellenism or Hellenistic. And what Hellenism was this infusion of Greek culture into Roman culture. It was a cultural thinking, Hellenistic. It was sort of retro because we're injecting Grecian thought into our day. So they're bringing things from the previous culture, and so even the architecture that is now famous, including the Colosseum itself, was Hellenistic. It was this retro thinking. We're going to bring in some of this Greek, so we're going to start wearing togas and sandals, and it was like bringing back bell bottoms, and that kind of thing. But it had a purpose to it because the Hellenism was also infusing Greek culture in a way which was mythology. So they were accepting and enjoying many religious cultures. Many religions now were infused. It's called ecumenism. We're against, because God is against ecumenism. Jesus Christ is exclusive. He and He alone is God. There is no other. But Hellenistic thinking is, well, okay, that's fine if you have your God, but you have yours, and you have yours, and you have yours, and we're all good. And the reason that this flourished so well in that culture was because of Pax Romana. You can keep the peace, as John Lennon would say. Imagine if there were no heaven. Who would fight over nothing? You see that? That is from the devil. But it sounds good. Imagine if there was peace and nobody was killing Jews over in Palestine right now over. You could see. So what they did was they came up with this idea, this Hellenistic thinking. Well, let's build this amphitheater to entertain everyone. This would be a place where we can all get together
No matter what religion you are, you can fight at that, but we can all come to this big, huge amphitheater together and be entertained. You don't realize that the devil is behind good things. The devil gives out more blessings than anybody realizes. All he has to do is get you off the focus. He's won. Don't walk around with a pitchfork and red. So what he does is he sets up this big, huge amphitheater, the Colosseum, and he does this so that all that they want you to do in order to keep the peace is have you to stop thinking. To stop thinking of your own stuff and focus on entertainment. Now, it's a barbaric entertainment, isn't it? I mean, think of the things that took place in the absolute barbaric bloodshed within the Colosseum. I mean, there were hundreds. They say that some of the animals that were atrocious and vicious, they wiped out completely. They extinct from the quadrant of the world because so many of them were killed within the Colosseum. Literally thousands upon thousands of beasts and humans were killed within here, all by the fact of entertainment. And the purpose of it was to get you to stop thinking or to shape the common man's thinking. And that whole time, you're distracted because you're not thinking about God. It is no coincidence, my brothers, that football is played on Sunday. Now I know I'm going to lose some of you guys because you guys just love the NFL, baby. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. I know. I'm not opposed to football. Now, I like sports a little bit. Not really. But every now and then I'll go down to see the Indians play, and it's a good game. You know, it's America's pastime. They're playing baseball, but I mean, good night. If it's Sunday, like the other day, it was Pittsburgh and Browns. The Muni lot was full before, at 8 a.m., everyone's down there tailgating. It is a massive feat. That is set up by the devil. I know people who will miss church because they go into the football game. You think God likes that? I know people who miss all kinds of things because of sports. I know people who have run their lives totally sideways because of sports. Now, I also know people who have done really well in life because of sports. I know of inner city things that have really pulled people out of the muck and the mire because of sports. So there's two sides to this. But the truth is there's heaven or hell, and there's no in between. You can have a really good life and die and go to hell. And LeBron James and all of his glory and all of his splendor will do him no good in hellfire. That explains verse 3. The ox knows his owner. That's common sense. Even the jackass knows the master's crib, but Israel doesn't know. And why don't they know? Because they don't consider. They're distracted. Sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel to anger. They are gone away backward. And then look what he says. And this I hear of our current day in verse 5. Why should ye be stricken any more? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart is faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head, there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. What a graphic illustration that he's using to describe these people. They're like a festering sore that is full of pus because the infection is set in. Gangrene is set in. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified or with ointment. So I hear to say, society is so far gone, it's beyond redemption. And I hear that about our own, like the red, white, and blue is beyond hope. It's gone, it's done. Depends on the day how I feel. But there's a twist to that. Actually, there's two twists within the passage. The first twist is in 7 and 8, because look what he says. Your country is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. That is a vivid picture, but what he does to make this big splash of color in this brown and white photo is verse 8. It says, and the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Now that's a painting, isn't it? I mean, that is a portrait. You see that, I have that at my house. I have a bunch of woods and some pines and green, and then this big, gnarly, dead tree sticks out. Doesn't belong, I mean, it is so like obvious, this big, huge, dead tree sticking out, all covered. Everything else is green, but this one. This is reverse. It's a dry and barren land. Everything is brown and dead. It's just a bunch of sticks. It's a wasteland. But right in the middle of it is this just an oasis. He look at the illustration. He says it's like a cottage with cucumbers. You see how vivid God is doing to try to attract their thinking, to make them consider, to think. The daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as lodge in the garden of cucumbers, and besieged it. Now this just took place over lunch when we were working with the geriatric team. We sit around and as philosophers, and we fixed all the problems of the world. So we were talking about how some of the heinous things that are happening around the world with Ukraine and Israel, and all current events. And then Guy says something, he says, but the truth is I've never had a day in my life where I've been hungry. The world's on fire, but really, think about it, it doesn't really affect us at all, does it? Think of the things that are happening where we get all up in arms over stuff, but if you didn't turn on your sin box and watch it on the TV, you wouldn't even know what's happening. Other than stupid people wearing masks but them people are dumb, so we just, whatever. No, I shouldn't say that. Some of you wearing masks. I retract. We'll edit that from the tape. I shouldn't have said that. God is illustrating these things for us because his people don't understand stuff. And we do. Verse 10, hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Wait a minute. How did we get over to gay? I didn't know Israel was very known for sodomy, homosexuality. But they were. Because that's the way that things go when society crumbles. Romans 1. Hear you word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom, which means that he's kind of referring to the people in the upper echelons who are running the country. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom, give ear unto the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. And then look what he says here, and it gets very down close to home. Verse 11, to what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me? Saith the Lord. What are you doing? I am full of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of goats. when you come to appear before me, who hath required this at your hand to tread my courts? So they're coming, they're doing things, they're making offerings, they're church attenders. But look what he says. Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons, the Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. You know what that is? That's churchianity. It's not Christianity. It's churchianity. That's a church that has 50,000 programs going on, and it's open every minute of the day, and they're constantly doing something, doing offerings, incense, rams, lambs, church, youth project, this old man's project, this project, 50,000 projects, but they're all Hellenistic. Because none of them offend anybody, and none of them make a stand. Because if somebody were to bring something to the leadership's attention that might offend somebody and actually make a stand and make a difference in society, we cannot disrupt the apple cart. So God is saying, look, I'm sick of all this stuff already. I'm tired of it. I can't even believe you bring this in my courts. It's so watered down. Jesus mentioned this, didn't he? I'd rather you be hot or cold, but lukewarm makes me want to puke. Jesus said. We got to be careful that we don't get that way. Somebody mentioned about the church because we're putting on an addition, and they said, well, we don't want to change. We don't want to be like a big church. And I said, believe me, we don't have that problem because I offend people all the time. So eventually half the people leave. Only weird people stay. We're too dangerous. Here, they are absolutely the opposite. But look, then. He says 15, and when you spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. So sad. When they really need him, too late. I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wait a minute, what? That can't be. Maybe that's hyperbole. That their hands really aren't full of blood, but it's kind of like their hands are full of blood. Like maybe, he's just being it's hyperbole. Is it? Okay, so issue one. Let's just talk and get past it. Issue one passed. It was voted in by the electorate to do absolutely barbaric stuff to children. Absolutely, rip babies up to 9 months, rip their arms off in the womb. That can't be. It is not. That's just hard to bring it in, isn't it? And no one would do that. They do. And you think, wait a minute, but that was voted in, that was chosen by our neighbors. Do you guys know people that voted for that? I'm sure. And you look at that person and you think, wait a minute though. They're my neighbors. I see them every week. They're out mowing their lawn. Their stripes are nice and straight. They do really good. Their landscaping looks good. They have their own kids. I think that they love their kids. They have a dog. They just seem, I see them at the store. We say hello. They're drinking their Starbucks, and they're average people. But they're murderers. They chose to allow something so barbaric. How can that be? That is the art of the subtlety of the devil. He can make evil look pleasing. that people who you would think that's a good old-fashioned American, pretty decent person, how can they choose this? They do. And they did. That's what's happening here. Wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes. Stop doing evil. But the thing is they don't know. They don't know. They don't really understand what they're doing, because if they did, I would think that's probably a bit much. Learn, he says in 17. Learn to do what? Learn to do well. Okay, what is that? Seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, and that's hard. That is not easy for us to do. You know why I know? Because we're stingy people. Now, not anybody in here. I know you are all generous. So last night at 10 o'clock at night, I stopped at Burger King to get my health food. and a greasy bacon cheeseburger with onion rings, because I'm a health nut. And so I pay for it. And I look in there, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm surprised they're even open. But there's 3 people in there. And you have a pretty good idea who's working at Burger King at 10 o'clock at night, don't you? You know, the moles and or whatever, those things in your ears, and stuff. I look in, it looks like there's 3 people in there. So I gave, the bill came to $10, and so I said, here, I gave her $60. The guy's like, what are you doing? And I said, I don't want any change. Because they're working as hard as I do at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, making nothing. They're working just as hard as I do. I mean, maybe not quite as hard, but pretty darn close. They're right? Learn to do well. Seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, and judge the fatherless. Oh, that looks like a hint. Judge the fatherless, people who don't have a mom or a dad. Plead for the widow who has no one. And then look how compassionate the Lord is. Because in one sense, it's like they're so wicked and lousy and wretched. But then he says, come now. Let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, though they shall be white as wool, snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be white as wool. If ye be willing and obedient. You see, it can't just be obedience, because you can force a child to do what's right, but in his heart, he's giving you the finger. You know it. So it's both. If you be willing and obedient, ye shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, ye shall be devoured with the sword, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. How is the faithful city become an harlot? It was full of judgment, and righteous lodged in it, but now murderers. And again, you'd say, not murderers. I mean, actual literal murder. You know that Ohio has over 800 murders about per year? That doesn't even talk about violent crime, rape, burglary, assault. We're talking downright murder. Somebody took a gun or a knife and stabbed and killed them, on average, every year in our state. How do you get that way? The silver has become dross, thy wine mixed with water. Thy princes, again, the leadership, the princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. I was invited to a political thing, and I consulted with Brother Mark, and I said, hey, you guys know some of these, you know the people who are at this dinner thing, what do you think? And he's like, don't go to the den of thieves. Actually, he was very much kinder than that. But at the end of the day, he's like, it's a den of thieves. And I said, you know what, you're right, I'm not going. Everyone loves gifts and followeth after rewards, bribery. They judge not the Father. Again, it goes back to the children. I wrote a letter to every single city council person in Hudson. And I said, hey, just a suggestion. Being that the corporation of Hudson is like $150 million annual budget, that's a relatively good business if you're the CEO of that. I said, maybe you should consider the acres of YDC, where the Youth Detention Center used to be, and make that, again, something for poor people of youth, so that our wealthy, hoity-toity Hudson could be benevolent. The poor people, the poor children in our area. You know what the one guy wrote back? Which most of them didn't write back. His comment was, okay, great. We're no different than they are here. Who wants to take care of kids that nobody else wants? No one. Because the heart of man is deceitful above all things, desperately wicked. Who can know it? Now we may be able to understand a little bit what's happening in Luke chapter 1. So let's go back there and look. The Christmas card story. I know, isn't this flowery? I'm doing the best that I can to make flowery sermons for Christmas. It's as best I can do. I'm really trying. These old people, Elizabeth and Zacharias, they're churchgoers, they're temple, they're faithful, they're blameless, they've walked in the light of the Lord, they've served their whole life, and they have no child. They had no child because Elizabeth was barren. And why was Elizabeth barren? Because God said so. Now they're both well stricken in years. And they're still faithful. They're still doing it because they realize there's no discharge in this war. And it came to pass that while he was executing the priest's office before God in the order of his course, according to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. And look at this, and the whole multitude of the people were praying without the time of incense. They're all earnestly praying, and there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. You think, wait a minute, what were they praying about again? By chance, were they praying for a child still? No. Who would want a child at 80? Or at 50? Eek. Were they praying for a child still? Were they praying for a miracle? That tells a lot about them. Such is the kingdom of heaven. And the whole multitude of the people were praying without at the time of incense, and there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel of the Lord said unto him, Look at this, fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard. The wife, Elizabeth, shall bear thee a son. That was his prayer. And of all the things that he could be praying for, and all the things of just the things of life, all this stuff we have, and even well into their 80s where they're well stricken in years, the godly man who walks in the ordinances of the Lord and is blameless knows the meaning when Jesus said, such are the kingdom of heaven. And it's not just childlike faith, because doesn't this sound familiar to you? A person who is walking with God who can't have children. And they get up into their old age. We can't have children. Does that not sound familiar to you? It sounds a little bit like Abraham and Sarah that we just dealt with over the past couple of weeks. Sounds a lot like that, actually. But even if you go through it, Rachel, just a generation later, Rachel, what happened to Rachel? She was barren. But then, later on in years, God decides, give her a child. Or even Hannah. Hannah prays, crying at the temple. She's barren, has no child. And God does it again. See the link here? Because birth of a child, the absolute miracle of a conception, even when they're old, what God is saying, by this, he is about to move the big marker of the whole entire kingdom is about to advance. And he does it letting people who are godly know by a miraculous birth that the whole kingdom bases on a child. The entire kingdom moved. The nation of Israel advanced at a birth of Abraham and Sarah in their 90s. Because God miraculously is allowing us to know that actually children are such as the kingdom of God. That's how important they are to him. And they ought to be that important to us. Because now, think of this. If you just turn back, you realize in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, what's in between there? Nothing. There's 400 years of silence in between the prophet of the Old Testament and the moving of the New Testament. 400 years of nothing. You want to know what marks it? A child is born. Not just any child. One that is born of Zacharias and Elizabeth in their old age. And this would not just be any child, but he would be called a prophet of the Lord. Because God is allowing us to know we are on the precipice of something huge, because it won't be long. In fact, 6 months later, there will be another miraculous birth of a child, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, the King of Kings. The kingdom is advancing.